The lights inside the auditorium were bright enough to make anyone nervous. Rows of people filled the massive conference hall, some chatting quietly, others scrolling through their phones while waiting for the next speaker to begin. The event was supposed to celebrate innovation, resilience, and the power of entrepreneurship. But no one in that room expected that the most unforgettable moment of the night would come from a quiet man standing nervously near the edge of the stage. His clothes were simple. A clean but slightly worn jacket, dark jeans, and shoes that looked like they had seen better days. In one hand, he held a folded piece of paper. In the other, he clutched the strap of a small backpack. From the outside, he looked like just another attendee hoping to get a moment at the microphone. But what happened next would shock everyone in the room. The host had just finished introducing a series of successful entrepreneurs when a tall woman in a sharp designer suit walked toward the center of the stage. She was the CEO of a powerful tech company and the main sponsor of the event. Her reputation was well known, brilliant, confident, and unapologetically direct. She scanned the audience with a confident smile. Then she noticed him. The man slowly stepped forward, approaching the side of the stage where an open mic session had just begun. He raised his hand slightly, hoping to speak. The volunteers hesitated, but eventually nodded and allowed him to step onto the stage. A few people in the audience clapped politely. He adjusted the microphone and cleared his throat. My name is *, but before he could finish, the CEO stepped forward, her voice cutting through the room. Excuse me, she said sharply. This stage is for founders, innovators, and industry leaders. The room fell silent. The man froze. She looked him up and down, clearly unimpressed. This isn't an open talent show, she continued. If you're not on the program, please step down. We're on a tight schedule. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The man tried again. I just wanted to share something. Get off this stage. She interrupted, louder this time. The words echoed across the auditorium. A few awkward laughs came from the crowd, but most people simply stared in disbelief. Cameras were already recording, and phones quietly lifted into the air. The man stood still for a moment. Then he slowly nodded. All right, he said calmly. He stepped away from the microphone and began walking toward the stairs at the side of the stage. As he passed the front row, a small boy no older than 7 ran up to him. Dad, the boy whispered, grabbing his hand. Some people in the audience noticed the moment and murmured quietly, a single dad. The man picked up his son and held him close, whispering something reassuring. They turned and began walking toward the exit. But just before they reached the doors, a voice suddenly called out. Wait. It wasn't the CEO. It was the event organizer. He rushed toward the stage, holding a tablet, his face pale with shock. Stop them, he said urgently. The CEO frowned. What's going on? The organizer turned the screen toward her. Do you know who that is? She looked annoyed. No. Should I? The organizer swallowed. Nightfall. The name rippled through the room like electricity. Several people gasped. Others immediately began whispering. Nightfall was not just a name, it was a legend in the tech world. For years, the mysterious developer behind the alias Nightfall had created open-source security tools, used by millions of companies worldwide. Governments used his code. Major tech giants relied on it. Yet no one knew who he was. He had never revealed his identity. Until now, The CEO's confident expression suddenly vanished. You're joking, she said quietly. But the organizer shook his head. He registered anonymously for the event. Look at the email domain. The same one tied to the Nightfall project. The room was buzzing now. Phones were lighting up. People were standing. The CEO turned toward the exit. Just as the man reached the doors. Sir, she called out quickly. He stopped. The entire audience held their breath. She walked off the stage and approached him slowly, her high heels clicking against the floor. For the first time since the event began, she looked uncertain. Are you Nightfall? The man glanced down at his son, who was resting his head on his shoulder. Then he looked back at her. Yes, he said simply. The silence in the room felt almost unreal. Someone in the crowd began clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted into applause. The CEO stood there, stunned. Why didn't you say something? She asked. Nightfall gave a small smile. You didn't let me finish. The crowd laughed softly. The tension in the room slowly shifted from shock to admiration. Asterisk, the organizer stepped forward quickly. Sir, we would be honored if you came back to the stage. Nightfall looked at his son. What do you think? He asked him gently. Asterisk, the boy grinned. Let's do it, Dad. So they walked back. But this time, the applause was thunderous. Asterisk, when Nightfall reached the microphone again, the entire room stood on its feet. He adjusted the mic and took a deep breath. Hi everyone, he said calmly. My name is Daniel. The applause continued. He waited patiently until the room quieted down. Asterisk, I wasn't planning to speak tonight. He continued. I came here because my son wanted to see what a tech conference looked like. Asterisk, the boy waved shyly at the audience, causing a wave of smiles across the crowd. Nightfall continued. 5 years ago, my life was very different. I was working 2 jobs after my wife passed away. During the day, I delivered packages. At night, after my son went to sleep, I wrote code. The room was completely silent. I didn't have investors. I didn't have connections. I didn't have a stage like this. He paused. All I had was time, determination, and a laptop that overheated every 20 minutes. The audience laughed warmly. But I kept building. I kept learning, and eventually, people started using my work. He glanced briefly toward the CEO. Sometimes the world assumes that success has a certain look, a certain title, a certain outfit. A few people nodded. But innovation doesn't care about any of that. He placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. Real innovation comes from curiosity, persistence, and sometimes from a single dad coding in a tiny apartment after midnight. The audience erupted into applause again. The CEO watched quietly from the side of the stage, clearly reflecting on what had just happened. Nightfall finished his talk with a simple message. Before judging someone, give them the chance to speak. You never know whose story you're interrupting. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly a full minute, and long after the event ended, people weren't talking about the keynote speeches or the corporate presentations. Asterisk, they were talking about the quiet man who was told to get off the stage. Asterisk, the man they almost never heard from. Nightfall, and the lesson he left behind that night was simple but powerful. Asterisk, never underestimate someone just because they don't look like success.